Gemini said, "Ihorb skaya." Dana White stood on that podium at Zuffa Boxing 8 Sunday night, and he did not mince words, because he did not have to. He was asked a simple question about Floyd Mayweather and the mounting financial disaster currently engulfing the career of the most iconic figure in modern combat sports. Most promoters would have danced around the topic or offered a scripted non-answer, but White went the other direction. He spoke with the weight of a man who has seen it all before. He talked about the sheer scale of wealth that Floyd once commanded, and then looked at the reality of how it simply vanishes in the brutal machinery of professional sports. Think about the irony here for a moment. Dana White is the architect of the UFC empire, and he is publicly floating the idea of throwing a lifeline to Floyd Mayweather. That is not a gesture you extend to a man who is doing fine. It is an acknowledgement that the house of cards is wobbling. The man known as money is suddenly defined by the lack of it, and the contrast is as stark as it is alarming. Behind the private jets and the Instagram photos of cash piles sits a reality of unpaid debts and legal entanglements that are closing in from every side. You have to understand that we are not talking about a simple investment hiccup here. This is a systemic collapse of a financial legacy that should have been untouchable. Over a 21-year career, Floyd Mayweather allegedly banked $1.2 billion. That is not just wealth, it is generational security meant to last for a century. And yet in 2026, we are watching it evaporate in real time. Across courtrooms in New York and California and Nevada, the lawsuits are stacking up like cordwood. And the narrative is shifting from champion to defendant. When Logan Paul speaks openly about $1.5 million, he is still owed from a fight that occurred years ago. You know the rot has reached the foundation. He claims there was a $10 million cash deal brokered in the Middle East that allegedly relied on his likeness without his fair share of the proceeds. That is the kind of detail that turns rumors into a full-scale forensic investigation of where the money actually went. The IRS is circling with a $7.3 million lien on the books for back taxes in Nevada alone. When the United States government begins placing claims on your assets for unpaid bills from 2018 and 2023, you are not just having a bad year, you are losing control of your narrative. And if the civil side was not enough, we have the criminal charges. A $200,000 check for an Audemars Piguet watch bounced at a resale shop in Las Vegas. That is the detail that hurts the most, because it is so small in the context of a billionaire, but so massive in the context of dignity. If he is convicted on these felony charges, he faces between 1 and 20 years in prison. A man who once flew his entourage around the globe in a private jet is now fighting for his freedom over a timepiece that he could not afford to cover. The watch is just the beginning of the spiral, though. The real engine of this destruction is a man named Jonah Reconitz. Floyd called him his brother. He trusted him with everything. He stood on stage at a New York City forum in 2025 and told the world he trusted this man 100%. That public declaration is likely the greatest regret of his professional life. You have to look at who Reconitz was to understand how this happened. He was already a convicted felon who had served time for a corruption scheme involving the NYPD and the steering of union pension funds into failing hedge funds. The industry knew it. The real estate world knew it. But Floyd Mayweather, the man who prided himself on being the sharpest guy in the room, let him inside. With Reconitz as his advisor, the spending spree began. Vada Properties started buying office space and affordable housing portfolios, and even the Versace mansion in Miami. On the surface, it looked like a pivot to mogul status, but underneath the surface, it was a shell game. The lawsuit claims that this 1,000-apartment Manhattan portfolio deal was a complete misrepresentation. Mayweather thought he was buying the whole thing, but the reality was a 5% stake in a single limited liability company that was eventually liquidated. The Versace mansion deal fell apart. The Chicago investments evaporated. And all the while, money was being moved around in ways that Floyd allegedly did not authorize. The suit claims that Reconitz redirected funds into accounts connected to an entity called Frist Apex Ventures. They were literally hijacking the cash flow of a boxing legend. In November of 2025, Mayweather was directed to sign an FAA bill of sale for his private jet. No buyer name was on the paper. No price was listed. It was effectively a blank check in the form of an aircraft, and the proceeds went to satisfy a Bugatti obligation that had nothing to do with Floyd. The money moved through channels that the boxer apparently could not track or verify. Even more damning is the email chain. In January of 2026, Reconitz directed portfolio managers to route 20% of distributions to his own venture firm, and he called it the usual account. That is the language of a man who felt absolutely untouchable. He was treating the fortune of one of the greatest athletes in history like a personal slush fund. $15 million in settlement proceeds from an SL Green Realty Corporation claim disappeared into these same accounts. A co-defendant has reportedly admitted in a phone call to Floyd that these transfers were directed by Reconitz without the boxer ever having a say in the matter. That admission is the smoking gun. It is the moment the facade breaks. But don't think this is just about one bad actor. Floyd Mayweather has also opened a second front against Showtime Networks and Steven Espinoza. He is suing for at least $340 million and potentially up to $680 million when you account for punitive damages. He is accusing his former broadcast partners of facilitating a massive financial fraud alongside his other manager Al Heyman. Think about the audacity of that math. He claims $175 million was stolen by his investment manager and another $340 million by his broadcast partners. That is $500 million that he says was misappropriated by the people he trusted to build his kingdom. If you take these numbers at face value, it is a catastrophe of management. It suggests a total lack of oversight that is frankly staggering for a man of his stature. You see this chaos bleeding into his professional schedule as well. Every exhibition fight he announces now feels like a frantic reach for cash. The Mike Tyson fight was delayed by injury. The Greece fight against Mike Zambidis was halted by an emergency injunction because he allegedly took millions in advances from CSI Entertainment and then tried to book a separate fight in another country without telling them. These are not sports headlines anymore. They are desperate moves by a man running out of oxygen. When you stop to look at the total picture, the list of troubles is relentless. A felony theft charge, unpaid tax liens, child support orders, rent disputes in Manhattan, and lawsuits in 4 different states. It is a portrait of a financial empire that has been picked apart by sharks while the owner was looking the other way. The rematch with Manny Pacquiao, which was meant to be the ultimate safety net, is now in complete limbo. That fight would have been the highest-grossing event of the year, but instead it is another casualty of the ongoing litigation. The question that hangs over all of this is whether there is any way back. Can he resolve these lawsuits? Can he survive the criminal charges? Can he get into a ring with Tyson or Pacquiao and actually collect a paycheck before the walls finally close in? Dana White has opened a door to a possible partnership, but that door is heavy, and it might not be open for long. The era of the undisputed Money King has officially transitioned into the era of the high-stakes legal battle. What we are witnessing is the collision of a massive ego and a systemic failure of trust. We are looking at the dark side of the sports machine, where the people who help you make the billions are often the ones who find the most creative ways to take them back. It is a cautionary tale that echoes through every corridor of professional athletics. Floyd Mayweather used to talk about how he owned his own time and his own destiny and his own bank account, but right now he is entirely at the mercy of judges and attorneys and the people he once called his friends. The tragedy is that for a man who spent his whole life training for opponents he could see in front of him, he was entirely unprepared for the ones hiding in his own shadow. The numbers tell a story of total depletion, and the court documents tell a story of betrayal that would take a decade to unwind. In the end, it serves as a cold reminder that being the best fighter on the planet does not make you a master of the boardroom, and when you stop paying attention to the details will eventually come for you. The fight for his legacy is no longer happening in the ring because the ring is empty and the stadium lights are dim. The real fight is happening in the dusty folders of legal filings and the silent transfers of bank accounts that he now has to claw back with every ounce of power he has left. Whether he succeeds or whether this is the final chapter of a legend in decline is something we will be analyzing for a long time to come. It is not just about the money anymore, it is about the cost of maintaining a lifestyle that was never built on solid ground. We will keep watching because, in the world of sports and money, nothing ever truly stays hidden for long. Every transaction eventually leaves a trail, and every secret eventually finds a courtroom. The story of Floyd Mayweather in 2026 is a lesson in how fast a kingdom can fall when the gatekeepers are the ones opening the doors for everyone else to walk through. You have to wonder if he looks back at the days when he was just the guy with the gloves and realizes that was the only time he was actually in control of his own fate. Success is loud, but the silence that follows a crash is deafening. And for Floyd Mayweather, that silence is currently being filled by the sound of lawyers and the pressure of a ticking clock that he can no longer outrun. This is what happens when you build an empire on trust instead of verification, and when you let the business of being you get in the way of actually running your life. The story is far from over, but the damage to the reputation of the man who defined an entire era of wealth in boxing is already severe. Stay tuned because this investigation into the collapse of a legend is only beginning to reveal the depth of the deception. The only thing certain now is that when the dust settles on these court battles, the financial picture of one of the richest athletes in history will look nothing like the myth he spent years building for the cameras. It is a stark reminder that in this business, the final bell does not always ring in the ring. Sometimes it rings in a courtroom, and for Floyd Mayweather, the fight has never been more difficult. If he can find a way to navigate these legal minefields, it would be the greatest comeback of his career, but the odds are shifting against him every single day. The money is gone, or at least the version of it that existed in the public imagination is fading fast. What remains is a complicated web of debt and legal defense that would break anyone with less resources. You are watching a masterclass in how not to manage a fortune, and it serves as a warning to everyone who thinks the checks will just keep coming forever. There is no such thing as an endless fountain of cash, even for the man who named himself after it. The reality of his situation is finally catching up to the lifestyle, and the results are playing out for the entire world to see. As we look at the mounting evidence and the sheer volume of litigation, one thing is clear. The man in the mirror is the only one who can explain how it all went so wrong, but he is currently too busy fighting everyone else to admit it. This is the truth behind the headlines. It is messy, it is expensive, and it is a long way from the victory lane. Keep following the case if you want to understand the true cost of an empire built in the shadows. The final act is still being written in the court records of New York and Las Vegas, and the outcome will define whether this is a temporary setback or a permanent end to the era of money. We are watching the end of an identity. And that is the most expensive loss of all. In script and end.